Welcome to Momentum Magnet, a podcast to inspire your growth. I'm Kathryn Morales, and your host in helping you find ways to make positive changes for your business, health, relationships, and life. We always have a path to a happier ending, so let's get started today. Hello, and happy Friday. Welcome to Momentum Magnet. We are here every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern to talk to you about how you can make changes in your life and business. This has been quite a week in America, which I feel like I have said over the course of 2020 on many Fridays. And again, I see myself facing kind of the same message as we begin this podcast today. But as we kind of grieve from the trauma the nation has been through in the last few days, I wanted to address a topic that has come up so much in my agency over the course of the last 3 months. More and more big companies and even startups are looking to employ experts to help them in their business. And a lot of times they have buyer's remorse from previous relationships. They wonder about the actual credentials of the people that they might hire as consultants or small agencies or one-off thought leaders. And today's episode is all about that. How do you get great talent in your business for a second opinion? How do you do that? By finding day rate consultants, by engaging in small term projects, and by really asking yourself the right questions so you're never afraid if you made the right hire. And I invited the perfect guest to have this conversation. Today, I welcome Kathryn Rose. She's an innovator, serial entrepreneur, and founding CEO of Wisehur. It's a global knowledge marketplace that helps women, business owners, and professionals overcome unique challenges to access one-on-one, on-demand service from executives, coaches, mentors, education, and resources that can accelerate either their business or their own career growth. She's a former Wall Street executive sales leader and an author of 9 books, which I have a few questions about. And featured in Forbes, Inc., CBS, MarketWatch, Fox News, and more. Kathryn, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Karen. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I always think these conversations are really fun, and I've been getting great feedback out of the last few months on just how people are taking nuggets and running with them in their business. Mm-hmm. So today I thought we can probably just start and let's talk about the winding journey that you've been on, going from Wall Street, being a published author, to founding a global company, Wisehur.
Yeah. And again, thanks for having me. And it has been quite a journey. I mean, it's, the last global economic crisis was back in 2007. And that's when I was on Wall Street. And, it seemed one day everything sort of melted down. And, I was pregnant with my son. I was 8 months pregnant with my son, and they shut our division. And at the same time, my mom had a brain aneurysm that left her paraplegic. So in 3 months, I lost my job. I had a brand new baby, and I had to take care of my ailing mother. And so I couldn't go back and take a full-time job. And it was a very, challenging time, obviously. And but I knew I had to do something. So I called all my old brokers and I said, what can I do? How can I help? And they said, we want our websites to rank in Google. And I was like, sure. How hard is that? Right? I had no idea. I didn't even know it was called search engine optimization. I knew nothing. I was like, why not? I can do this. And so at the time, everybody wanted me to take their course or read their book, and I just didn't have time for that. And I thought, if I could just find someone to show me, right? Just show me how to do this. And so I did. I found someone, I paid for his time, and within 2 weeks, I got my very first paying client. And then I took that into a successful SEO and social marketing consultancy. And then I went back into corporate in 2014, ran sales for a software company. And that's when I kind of learned all about tech and the different pieces and parts. And then in 2017, when I built the business up and they sold it, I decided I wanted to do something that I felt I was uniquely qualified to be, to have an impact on. And I've been in the women entrepreneur space and small business space for, over 10 years. And I noticed that, we, as women, the vast majority of women-owned businesses are solopreneurs, and 88% are under 100,000 in revenue. And that actually was very similar statistics 10 years ago. And I thought, wait a second, why are we just, we're starting more businesses, but not more successful businesses? And where did I feel like I could have a good impact? And I built a very large network. And I thought, well, when I first started, one of the most helpful things for me was to be able to get this practical, tactical advice quickly. And so that's why, I put together WiseHer, and thank you for, being one of our experts. And, it's being able to quickly get unstuck, and having these vetted experts that will help you do that.
And I think that's the key. We talk about on this podcast all the time, momentum, and that is the ability to be in a system where you are growing and changing and constantly making progress. Because we all know, even though it's hard to wrap your head around, that it's that small consistency of positive change that adds up to give you those 10x gains year over year. Yeah. And you are right in starting a business and feeling like you need advice, but not wanting to take another course or read 6 books. It's the same idea with technology. I think, I don't want to read the manual. I want someone to show me how to do it.
Exactly. The IKEA box shows up and I'm not the one who gets excited about it. I'm like, no, show me a video. Let me figure out how to figure this out. But sometimes it's just that quick thing. And also what helps you do too is, I'm a user of my own network. I needed somebody to, I wrote this nurture sequence and I thought, I really just want someone to eyeball this. So I set up a call with one of our experts and, in 45 minutes, we went through the entire nurture sequence. She gave me these great tips and pointers and I ended up hiring her after that because I was able to, really, see and be comfortable with working with her and getting the advice that I needed. And it was super helpful because, as you know, in a business, you don't want to be everything. You cannot possibly do everything.
But I think you crack the code that has really been hard to solve in business that we see in so many other areas of our life. And that is a successful relationship requires a good emotional connection. Yeah. And you see that with doctors, with therapists, with interior designers. You usually have some sort of a chemistry session to see if they're a good fit. They may have an amazing set of credentials, but they may not be the right person for you.
Right.
And I think prior to maybe services like yours, it was very hard for companies to find a consultant that was willing to work with them for a very short period of time. Yes. And it's very hard as a consultant to constantly answer questions for free.
Well, that's the whole thing. Thank you for mentioning, because I've been in sales my entire career and I don't believe that free is a strategy. I really don't. And there's a lot of research around it that, and this was just something, my own personal belief that it's easier to get from any number to your real number than 0 to any number. And so, and then I just, I'm going to be releasing it soon, a blog post. I did a lot of research around it and it is true, that people really don't value on either side in a significant way, free advice. So, I can get free advice from you and then I'll go pay for it from someone else who gives me almost the same exact advice. And I'm going to take their advice instead because I've ascribed a value to it in my mind. And so what we do at WiseHer is, because we know that the vast majority of as I mentioned, women-owned businesses are under 100,000 in revenue. They can't afford my $500 an hour right off the bat, right? They want to just understand like what they can do to get off the dime and, get some more sales in, and what's a good sales plan. But eventually they may want to hire me for other things. So by ascribing a value to my time, even that we use a low bono. So all of our experts do take a fee, but we've set it up so it's a low bono fee. So they're giving back some of their time, but they're all getting value for it, right? And we give a portion of our proceeds back in the form of grants for women business and corporate education for women. So we've, allowed folks to give back and get exposure and things get a fee, but also be able to offer your valuable advice, right, to somebody who might not necessarily be able to afford, your expertise right off the bat.
Yeah. And I think it's important to sort of ground everybody in some of the most common challenges that businesses face, so you don't feel alone. So I have my set of understanding, but I'd be interested to hear from you. In your community, what are some of the most common questions or challenges people are facing with their business where they're seeking that expert opinion?
Well, prior to launching, we did this big research, and the top 4 challenges typically are like business planning, HR, finance, sales, and marketing. And so when we put WiseHer together, we were focused in that direction. And then, as somebody who is really big in mindfulness and things like that, we added in there life coaching and some emotional coaching and things, because it is a big part of what we do. But over the last, because we're just a little over a year old now, and over the last year, what we've noticed is that that a lot of that research is in fact true, but most of the calls are sales, marketing. And then, when COVID hit, a lot of it was, we did a fair amount of emotional support and leading at a distance and building teams at a distance and things like that. So and then the mindfulness piece for sure, like how am I going to manage homeschooling and my business and, just trying to stay positive. I think that was that was a fair amount of that for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also find times a lot of businesses will focus on questions around particular tactics or channel strategies. But when you really peel back the layers, it's really a strategic problem that they're facing. So they might say my email campaign is underperforming, or my social media brand identity isn't meeting my needs. But when you really push and shove and get under there, a lot of times it's a messaging misalignment or it's a targeting challenge. So I think also helping people walk through the right questions to understand the type of advice that they may need it is important when you're in consulting.
Yeah. And I mean, as you mentioned, it is very important to kind of get behind. There's always a story behind the story.
Right.
It's very rarely what they think the problem is. When I did sales consulting for many years too, there was always a reason, and it was either the product, the messaging, it could be the price, but oftentimes it was more around the messaging, and I think that our experts understand that. And, you can't apply to be an expert. As you know, you have to be invited. And when we do invite our experts, we do provide them with some sort of guidelines, around the calls to say that this oftentimes is what is happening, where they come to you and present like this is the problem, but it really is something maybe a little further down the road. So For people listening, can you give us some of your Kathryn Rose best tips for sales? Absolutely. I mean, I love to talk about sales because it's funny because I did not want to be in sales. I mean, when I graduated college, I went into marketing in the financial sector. And my dad had run his own financial services business for many years. And he always said, you'd be a great salesperson. I'm like, I don't want to to be in sales, because it just had that smarmy, you know what I mean? Even though he was not like that at all. I mean, he's just a really nice guy, and, he had this very personable affect and everything. And people trust him because he's a trustworthy person. And he would always say that to me, like, you don't have to be like that, but it just didn't feel right, for me at the time. And then part of it was when I noticed, like, all the salespeople were making all the money. I was like, wait a second, I can do this. And I just fell in love with it. And I think I want to say my number one tip for sales is selling isn't about selling. Selling is about buying. It's not about you. It's not about your product. It's about how it is helping solve the challenges of the buyer. Right. And sometimes it may not be. You may not be selling them something that is solving a problem, and that's okay. You can move on to someone else, right? So I think that whole idea of sales being uncomfortable for people, I always try to reframe it, especially for women. I have to say that, I would say that, as like there's all these stats where, there'd be a job description and it'll say, like, 90% of the characteristics would have to be correct for me to apply for it as a woman. But a guy's like, 40% works. You know what I mean? Like, I'll apply for it. And I think that sometimes we tend to overthink it, and we get really nervous, especially talking about money. And I'll tell people, like, I lead with my fees, always have, because I don't want to have this 45-minute discussion and then at the end find out they can't afford it because it's uncomfortable for them and it's uncomfortable for me, right? It makes everybody feel uncomfortable. So I usually say, because everybody wants to know what it costs. So I do I'll do a discovery call. I'll make sure what I am offering is helping them solve a problem. And if it is, I will say, well, typically people pay between X and X for my services. Does that fit with your budget tolerance? And if the answer is no, it doesn't mean it won't work. I could say something like, well, maybe we should do a pilot program, or, let's talk a little bit more about how this might fit with you down the road. Maybe we could do, this piece of it and then add later on. Right. So You're not really discounting, you're not really like closing off the relationship. But if you're way out of whack from their budget, then, it's just not going to work.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think especially working with female entrepreneurs in the coaching that I have done, a lot of times I have to coach people to really claim their value earlier in their business trajectory. Just because you have a baby business does not mean you have half value.
Right.
And I found that a lot of times we have to walk people through pricing to the value that you provide or the solution that you bring. What is the outcome that you're selling that has
value?
Value, absolutely. And a lot of people try to price for their time. And I always try to, coach people to price to their value.
Yeah, because, when I first started out in consulting, I had that very same mentality, and I was like, well, I need testimonials, right? I need, all these kinds of things. And so I undervalued, I sold this consulting package for a minimal amount of money to this company. And it was supposed to be 10 hours a month. And it turned like all of a sudden my calendar blew up. They had like a meeting here and a meeting there. And I didn't want to not show up because, I wanted to make sure that they got great service so they would recommend me. And I remember I went to this event and there was a huge consultant, very well known, who was doing a talk. And I always show up early for everything. It's just kind of in my DNA. And it just happened that he and I were there getting coffee. He showed up early too. And I said, hey, aren't you the speaker? And I said, well, I have you. Let me ask you this question. So I told him, I said, listen, these people are not listening to me. I'm giving them all my recommendations. They're taking advantage of my time. And as I kept talking, he got this, he just kept his smile on his face. The grin on his face kept getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, what's so funny? And he said, oh, it's not funny. He said, I've heard this story 1,000,000 times. He said, here's your problem. You're not charging them enough. He said, if you're charging them, $10,000 a month or $50,000 a month or $100,000 a month, he's like, you know that they're going to take your time as valuable, right? And he said, add a zero. And I'll always remember that. And that's what I've always done. So, and he said, first fire this client because they're never going to give you a good recommendation. He said, the more you give, the more they're taking and they're not appreciating it. So they're never going to be a good recommendation for you. He said, you need to figure out how to end that contract. He said, and then the next one, charge double or triple or whatever. And I was scared to death because this was my first client. I'd put a lot of effort in there, hoping, wanting them to give this, great recommendation. And I had to end the contract. And I didn't have a huge pipeline. And, but I went in and I took his advice and the next person hired me for my rate. I was scared. I was really scared. And they hired me for my rate and it was like, again, 10 hours a month. And if it was, 9 hours and 59 seconds, they would be like, okay. Cause they knew if I stayed longer, they would have to pay me additional fees. And they really, valued, I'm still friends with all the people that were there. They really valued my advice. And so, I think you're absolutely 100% right. Find whatever value that is and then stick to your guns. You can take discounted things, but know that that's what their mentality is.
Yes, I agree with you. And another really helpful piece of advice that I received in my early consulting years after a very similar situation with a client was to only work with people who knew what they needed. Because if they can't define their problem, they're never going to like your solution, because that means that probably the walls are burning. Yeah. Many, many things are broken. And because you're inserting yourself and trying to help, you can be the one held responsible, even though it may not even fall into your particular discipline. Mm-hmm. And that has been really, really helpful. I mean, it's very easy as a consultant to do favors and to say, yes, I'll do that for you and I'll add that in, no problem. But I find when those moments happen and when clients are consistently asking you to do that, they're not having the same respect for the relationship. And those usually don't end up to be high referring clients either, or you don't get the best output because you get distracted.
Well, yeah, and you want to have the clear deliverables and the clear, and like you said, the outcome. If someone comes to you and their house is burning, it's like, wait, you need a fire truck. You don't need a garden hose. You know what I mean? Like, I can only offer you a garden hose. Sounds like you need a fire truck. And I think that that's a good way too for folks out there listening who are thinking about hiring consultants. I think it's important what you just said is, they don't have to know everything, but they at least have the basics of, what problem am I trying to solve, right? Who's going to want to buy it? And where do I see the gaps? Where do I see the gaps and where this consultant can fill in? Because so many of us sometimes will be like, well, just do this, or you think you can read my mind, but you can't, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going through Wisehur, through a pandemic, and watching so many businesses, face the ramifications of closures, can you talk a little bit about some of the trends you're seeing in the industries that you serve and in this female entrepreneurship market?
Well, that's one of the interesting things about Wisehur is that, we do pay the fees to the experts. And, we've noticed a lot of calls coming through, obviously, for folks that need, the different kinds of help. But also our experts are getting business from it because they've had that first initial consult and conversation. And a lot of our experts their businesses are actually thriving because, there are folks that are being, they're downsizing and things like that. And they're bringing in contractors and different kinds of things. I think that, this is a very, very challenging time. But it's been, there have been challenging times, and we still have to do business. Like I tell people, I'm like, no one's coming to save us, right? The government's not going to come and save us. We have to save ourselves. So how do we do that? It's just staying the course, finding your way, and maybe it's not 10x growth this year, or maybe it's 2x, maybe it's just maintaining the status quo, and that's okay, right? And that's okay. But are there people making money in a pandemic? Yeah, there are people making money. And so it's like, how can I take my business and find that and find that the fit now that will help me, that will help propel me forward. And one of the biggest things I've noticed too, especially with the PPP, all this, and Wisehur has a foundation that works with small businesses through corporates. And we are on this task force for Massachusetts has, a bunch of COVID loans and grants and things. And I'm sure, places all over the country are doing the same things. But one of the number one things that we're noticing is these small businesses don't have their financial ducks in a row. And, in order to apply for any of this aid, you have to know your numbers. You have to have all of your things put together. So I think that, that's something that we've been seeing a great deal of as well.
Yeah, that was really early advice that I received in my business. And it was something I never felt very confident with, accounting and corporate taxes. I mean, I had no idea what that was going to look or feel like. So I hired someone from the very beginning, and I've gone through a few iterations of people to land on a team that I really like now. But I think that is the number one most important thing for businesses, because you need to be able to pull those numbers if you need them in a crisis. And you need to know what your cash flow is. You need to know what your profitability is. You need to understand your margin. And there's no way that you can grow a business if you do not know those numbers.
No. And, it's unfortunate that there's a number of businesses that are going out of business because they didn't really take the time to do that and set it up, from the beginning. It's, all's not lost. There's plenty of help out there. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that, and resources that are being provided that can give you the ideas of, here are the things you need to put together. Go put them together, and get your PPP and get your EIDL and any of the government programs that are out there that will sustain you during this time.
And where do you see your business going in the next 5 years? What are your goals as an entrepreneur?
Well, with Wisehur, one of my goals is to be able to, really have as much impact as possible. So, we have nearly 1,000 experts in 26 countries, and we're going to be growing that over the next year, and reaching into more geographic, areas, Jordan and Palestine and Latin America and things like that. So, we're expanding rapidly, and, for us, we'll be adding like fast track videos and different kinds of things that will help, just again, being in that lane of practical, tactical, quick advice. That's really where we want to live. And complement what we do now is we complement a lot of the mentoring and different programs for women's communities, because we're not really a community. We're, like I said, we live in that lane. So where I see us going is, my goal and mission is to be able to take this ecosystem of experts and impact the entire ecosystem of women in small business. So you have the people who need the advice, who get the advice from our experts, who then get their low bono fee that even perhaps will turn into, clients, for those experts, and then taking that fee and part of that fee and then giving it back in the form of grants that will help these businesses and corporate, folks in the professional world climb, to their next level. So we just want to have as much impact as possible, in helping sustain and grow the ecosystem.
And one of the most common things I find from people that have successfully started, big global businesses and have worked in industries for years is that they're often an author. Yeah. And I saw in your bio, right, we talked 9 books. So talk to us a little bit about what are you writing?
So this was a very interesting journey. So when I did, when I broke off and went, did the consulting thing for a while, it came out very quickly because, someone said to me, it would be helpful if you had a book, right? At the time we were writing books as business, we called it write a book as a business card.
Yep.
So it was like, okay. And I thought, okay, what can I do? And so I wrote, the original books that I wrote were these step-by-step guides to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, because nobody had any idea of even just how to set up a profile properly. So I saw a need in the marketplace, and I thought, okay, and very, similar to Wisehur, I found somebody, I paid for their time, and I set up my first self-published books. And there were 9 of them, there were 6 of them. The original ones were the 6 of them. And then I, launched kind of a speaking career, and I was speaking all the time about social media marketing and things like that. And then that kind of morphed into more strategy stuff. So my last 2 books were published, and they were, I think my last one was published in like 2011 or 12. Like, it's been a while. But Return on Relationship. So it was really written more for like the C-suite to talk about like what the value of relationships are, not looking at social media as like a post here and a post there. It's like, how do you really look at the relationship you have with your clients? And then the other one was more of a strategy level book too, Solving the Social Media Puzzle. And that was, hey, now you have a profile. What do you do with it? So that was really what it was. And I really enjoyed it. It takes a lot of time.
How long did it take you to write each book?
Well, the step-by-step guides were it didn't take me a ton of time, because literally it was screenshot. This is what you do, screenshot, you know what I mean? So they're very rudimentary and stuff. But what took me time was the very first one, the step-by-step guide to Facebook. I'm trying to remember, it was like 2008 or maybe 2009, something like that. And I had just finished it and going to release it in December. And that December, Facebook changed its whole design. And I had to go back in and change all the screenshots. And I was like, I'm never doing this again.
That's brutal. That is.
You know how they change, it changes, now it hasn't changed that much in the last couple of years, but in the first, I would say 5 or 6 years of Facebook, they pretty much every 6 months, they changed some major something.
That changed a lot though. The business manager and the ad serving tool. Keep changing. And I recently went in for the first time in a long time, and I was losing my mind. No, but nothing was where it used to be. And I was trying to answer an easy question for a client, and I'm like, where did it go?
Where is it? I know.
I felt like I was on a different planet, and it's hard. That's a bit frustrating. It is funny to think that we both worked in big enterprise in a time when social was beginning to take off. I actually did a marketing presentation for all of Fidelity Investments marketing department on what is social media and how would you use it for business. And I remember doing this keynote in an auditorium of hundreds of people mic'd up, and really we had to make a lot of it up and really make a lot of leaps onto how it could be used in the future for business, because a lot of it was not being used yet in that era.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, I was on Twitter almost from the beginning. I've got like 25,000 followers, and I'm not even really on Twitter that much anymore, because it has evolved in a way that it's not, my place, and I really like LinkedIn. I'm much more active there, and I'm much more active for Wisehur on Facebook. But I think one of the main things that I realized through this evolution, and I think I'm hoping that some of this message comes through too, is that as you mentioned, I think you mentioned something about being like learning different things, and you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know how the sausage is made. You just have to know these are the 5 ingredients, right? And even with Wisehur, I decided if I was going to start a tech platform, I better know enough code to be dangerous so that I can have these conversations with my developers, with others. And so that's what I did. So there's free, there's Free Code Academy, and there's a bunch of free coding sites. And I taught myself enough to be dangerous. And I even helped, code this first iteration of Wisehur. And what that did for me was, again, it gave me that level of understanding so I could have conversations, but I didn't get bogged down into a 6-month coding boot camp, you know what I mean? and trying to do it all, because my zone of genius, my places, I love relationships and selling and, and the impact piece of it. And so that's where I'm really focused. But I do think it's important to at least take the time to understand. And like with social media, I mean, I remember there were so many years when people were like, well, I just want someone to do it for me. And I'm like, well, it's not quite that simple. I mean, you have to have your own voice, and you have to have, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So what is a final tip you can leave people with if they feel like they have a pressing problem in their business? What's a good way for them to find that best fit in a consultant?
Well, I think there's a few things. So one, obviously, come to Wisehur. There's plenty of people there that you can avail yourself of in just in a short term. It's not set up to be a long-term consulting platform. It's like, hey, Karen, I'd really love to talk to you about my marketing strategy. And then if you vibe with Karen, then, you can hire her to be your consultant. And that's one of the reasons we wanted this, is so we can help, we can help our experts, get visibility for in front of clients. And then I think it's really, as you mentioned, it's really getting that, first, knowing what you want. And then when you meet with the person, really making sure they have a grasp of what it is that you need and how that they can actually solve your problems. And then, the ongoing relationship really is milestones. A friend of mine said to me years and years ago about marriage, about all these things. Relationships really are built around expectations. So we need to make sure that my expectations as a client align with your expectations as a consultant. And then regular check-ins. I have regular check-ins with our contractors all the time to make sure that not only are they doing what they said that they were going to do, but that I'm delivering what I need to them so that they can get their things done on time. So those are the kinds of things. And and also I think the other thing that's important to mention is be realistic. I mean, people need to get paid for their time. Everybody's got to get paid. So, be realistic about what your budget is when you're going into some of these conversations.
And I think it goes back to an analogy that's really simple to wrap your head around. You can have the best trainer in the world, but if you don't do the workouts, you're not going to see the results.
Yeah.
So if you just show up for that one training session a week and you never do your at-home boot camp, it's not going to be as effective. And I think the same thing is with consulting. I mean, the consultant can show up in the meeting, the therapist can show up, the doctor can show up, but if you're not taking the insights that they're giving you and applying them to your business and doing it consistently, you're not going to see the same dramatic gains that people that actually execute do. See?
Absolutely. Yeah, because it is, in the end of the day, it's all about the execution. And again, going back to the expectations, you may hand me a 50-page, marketing plan that, we're a small operation. I can't possibly do that. But you wouldn't do that because when we talk, you'll know we're a small operation. So it's like, okay, it's baby steps now. All right. Like, let's do this, put this step in front of the other step in front of the other step, and we'll be able to do it. But it's keeping in line with those expectations and making sure that you're delivering value on both sides. Right.
That's important. Delivering value on both sides is the cornerstone of any effective consulting relationship. So if somebody's interested in reaching out to Wisehur to become a client and hire one of your experts, or if they want you to maybe take a look at their portfolio or their resume to see if they would qualify to be invited into the program, how would they do that?
Well, you can just come to wiseher.com and you can find your expert. There's a find your expert thing. It's free to look around, for experts and things like that. It's free to sign up for Wisehur. It's when you want to book a call. It's there's the fee there. And then also on there, we have a chat module function there that if someone's really interested in joining us, then they can go ahead and just send a note in through that. And, and we have our folks standing by to take a look at it.
Fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure speaking to you today, Kathryn Rose of Wisehur. I think it's great to start off this year with giving people some really practical tips on how to get ahead in their business by hiring someone to help give them an edge. I know in my life, when I've overcome big medical challenges, relationship challenges, business challenges, I've always had an expert or someone with more experience than me to guide me and to push me along. And that's how I think, like you, I've been able to make big leaps because I've always been willing to invest in them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to see you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So thank you everybody for joining us on this first Friday of 2021. We are here every Friday at Momentum Magnet. I am Kathryn Morales, CEO and founder of Marketing Magnet, a boutique agency that helps clients get big growth with small teams and without big agency budgets. I love to hear from you and get your feedback on these episodes. Please go over to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and leave a review. Send me an email at Marketing Magnet if you want to reach out and you have a suggestion of guests or want to be one yourself. And we thank you. We always strive to make these episodes give you a piece of nugget that you can apply today. And I know we did that with Kathryn. So thank you and happy Friday.
Take care.
Take care.